But let's get started. I'm pleased to introduce a panel of some very interesting folks talking about broadband success stories. And they include Jason Bechtold, who is the Assistant City Manager of Westerville, Ohio. They include Laura Bradley, who's General Manager of YorkNet, the regional municipality of York, Ontario. It's another one of these regional municipalities that's a shared service organization, if you will, filling in the gaps in a large area of, in that case, 11 municipalities. And finally, Paulo Cesar Krauss from the city of Curitiba in Brazil, which all of these communities are have been honored in our award program, sometimes multiple times. So they certainly know what they're doing. So welcome, everybody. We are talking, of course, about digital connectivity at broadband speeds in this conference, but of course, as I said earlier, it's not really about the broadband technology. It's about what communities do with it that defines their success. So we're going to hear from these three people. They've all played vital roles in the deployment of broadband networks, but even more in getting them to deliver powerful economic and social impacts in this place called home. So after a brief presentation from each one, I'll be asking one or two questions of the speaker, and then we'll have time at the end for discussion. And if you have questions or comments that you'd like to add, please put them in the chat, and I will do my best to work them into the conversation. So let's start in Canada, specifically in that regional municipality of York, which was a Smart21 community in 2018. Now, this regional level of government provides those shared services to 11 municipalities. We've got a combined population of 1.8 million people, stretching from the border of Toronto to rural Lake Country in the north. And so here to tell us about their regional broadband network and its impact is the General Manager of YorkNet, Laura Bradley. Laura, over to you.
Thank you, Robert. Hopefully my audio is working. So that's step number one. Good. We're going to share screen. So let's just do that, get that going. Hopefully you can see my screen now. Good. So we'll go from there. Perfect. So my name is Laura Bradley. I am the general manager of YorkNet, and I'm going to share with you a little bit of our story, as Robert was sharing, relative to what we've been doing for the past 5 years. So we are a municipality that is akin to a county in certain areas or countries. And we happen to be next door to the regional municipality of Durham, where you will be presenting some information later this year, I heard. And so we have 9 member municipalities, which we call our local municipalities, and we cover about 1,750 plus square kilometers. And so that's just to give you perspective. We are directly north of the city of Toronto, for those of you internationally that are more familiar with the city of Toronto. So we have actually formed a corporation. YorkNet is actually a company that is actually owned and held by the regional municipality, separate from the municipal company. And we actually have a threefold mandate. And so we build connectivity and respectively dark fiber to do 3 specific things. One is to connect our regional operations. So we're actually responsible for police, paramedics, water, wastewater, waste, transit and transportation. Our local municipalities are in charge of things like libraries, community halls, fire halls, and a number of other things integrated with water and waste. And so the second component is to work with them to help them and facilitate their own connectivity that they can use through the dark fiber. And we do that as a customer supplier type relationship. And then thirdly, we share with private sector. So this is an area where we're a little bit unique in that what we do is we actually lease the dark fiber over to the private sector and ask them to actually service the businesses and the citizens. That's not a role we undertake in our particular organization. We don't operate as an ISP. We're very much focused on equity, and I think the pandemic for a lot of us in many countries, not just North America, saw that there was a high inequity. And the reason for that is going back to where we are. While we sit directly north of the city of Toronto, and the area that borders on Toronto is very urban, as you go farther north, as Robert was saying, it gets very rural. In fact, there's some major farming communities there, as well as very low density housing. And so this has an issue for those of you that are relative to broadband and the building and construction, as you just talked about, investment. And so our focus is really about expanding the connectivity for all aspects, both public sector as well as private sector. we always like to talk, or I always like to talk about the fact that we actually build critical infrastructure. So this slide is just a collection of some of those things. But as I mentioned, transit, major transit systems run through York Region, and they are actually dependent upon fiber for much of their operating systems. We connect our paramedics. We do a very integrated program with our water, wastewater. Up above, you can see our transportation up in the right-hand corner with all the cameras. So that's actually a system that's not just looking at things like accidents, but is actually looking at traffic volumes and monitoring and working things like up here in Canada, snow plows, to make sure that the lights change for the snow plows when they're coming down the path. So there's a lot of underlying technology. I like to say this is really the foundational component of how to run a large-scale municipality. And of course, we also have things here you see like economic and social personal benefit relative to what the ISP partners we have do in terms of serving our communities. Our focus is very much on having this digital platform, a very robust opportunity, and looking toward growth and what we can do in the future. And of course, supporting our businesses and residents, because that is an aspect in terms of what we do every day in the rest of our business. One of the things I'd like to share is we've just had 5 years as a corporation. We're just celebrating our 5th anniversary, and we've been able to actually grow our network significantly. So we took an investment that was just under 200 kilometers of fiber. We're now sitting at over 500 kilometers. I can share with you that our plan is to grow by about another 1,000 kilometers before the end of this decade. As you can see, the number of connections has also grown, and in fact, it's about double. And one of the things that you see on the slide about that is the difference of the 60% unique customers. So as I mentioned, we treat our local municipalities, which you might think as a partner municipality, as a customer. So they obviously have a certain number of connections and make up customer base. But the real growth of those unique customers is the 6 ISPs that since 2019 have actually joined connectivity on our network and are now actually servicing our citizens. And in some cases, servicing some of the smallest towns with fiber to the home ahead of larger areas because our investment happened to bring us there and created a very opportunistic, cost affordable way for them to be able to serve those citizens and businesses in those smaller areas. So this is really one of the guiding principles with our mandate that keeps us focused on what we do and how we do it. One of the case study opportunities we thought we'd take to share with you quickly today has to do with 2 of our regional hospitals. So on the right is a picture of a Corlucci Vaughan Hospital. This hospital was actually under construction pre-pandemic and was looking for a fiber connection. It's 8 kilometers away on a straight run of road from another hospital within York Region, Major Mackenzie, and this hospital wanted to be one of the first hospitals in the country and in the province that had a more advanced system relative to medical and data functions and those types of things. And what they wanted to do was join the 2 hospitals directly with fiber without going through carriers. And the reason for that is because of security and other aspects that they wanted to be able to control. So we were able to provide them with that fiber, 144 strand fiber that connects the 2 hospitals directly. And actually now we're actually connecting clinics along that route for them that are also partners with the hospital. And they've been able to position themselves as a major component in terms of being one of the first with 2 modular data centers connected by fiber optics. On the left-hand side, you see South Lake Regional Hospital. And one of the reasons we showcase this in our case study has to do with the pandemic. So South Lake, sort of toward the second half of 2020, wanted to start opening up testing centers outside of the actual hospital within the community. And they had some properties that they were able to activate and shift from their mode into testing centers. But a number of those properties did not have high-speed connectivity to them because in their traditional mode, they didn't require it at the time. But in this case, they actually wanted the testing center to be in direct contact with the hospital to make it quick and efficient and also be able to keep the electronic records updated. And so what we did is they approached us, and in a very short time span, in fact, 5 days, we were able to actually get the first testing center connected and up and actually active before they had it ready for receiving citizens. And the reality of that is we can act very quickly with mindfulness relative to the community because we are actually part of the community. this just represents where we think we're headed. We've already been working on, as you heard, expand and connect. When you see the type of dynamic growth that we've been under, in coming days, we will be focusing on new opportunities that we'll be sharing publicly. And a lot of those have to do with how we collaborate to make our growth even more substantial and reach our 1,000-kilometer goal, as well as how we implement and initiate different activities and projects across our region. That's all I have. Thank you.
Laura, thank you very much. Just a couple of quick follow-up questions before we turn to our next speaker. Why was dark fiber the right business model for YorkNet as opposed to stepping into lit fiber, service delivery, and so forth?
From our perspective, we think that dark fiber is a good model because it's really about the asset and the infrastructure. One of the things that municipalities do remarkably well is asset management of infrastructure and building of infrastructure. So by keeping ourselves out of the service dynamic, which is really where the high competition is, we don't have to worry about whether we service a particular area. We don't have to look at how we build the CSR model. We can actually just focus on infrastructure like we do with a lot of other services, water, wastewater, transportation, and work with partners to be able to make sure that they're doing the most effective job in terms of servicing our community.
Sure. Well, what you're doing is you're filling the gap. You're providing that middle mile that's so necessary. So tell us a little bit about the geography of the network, because you set a goal of equity and inclusion as part of your, what it is you exist to do, and you have to find a way to balance that with the financial realities of you need to have traffic on the network, you need to have partner ISPs and so forth paying you money to maintain all of this. So how do you balance that as you originally design and then continually expand the network?
Sure, great question. So it is a bit of a challenge, and I think that we always use our mandate. I call it our North Star as a way to keep us guided and founded. And so the reality of the situation is we build initially to enable the regional operations. And so what we do is we actually use a cost-benefit model of comparing the existing opportunities to the future of using YorkNet in terms of how we look at funding. But in addition to that, we actually, because we do water and wastewater in such a dynamic municipality, we actually have facilities that are scattered to the four corners of our odd shape. And so our directive is looking at the most effective and efficient ways to build to some of those four corners, as we like to call them. And so we've leveraged funding opportunities from some senior levels of government to do that, as well as we work with partners. So we do a lot of co-building with some of our ISP partners. So at the end of the day, we each own our own network, but we actually fund, how to look at that in terms of growth. And as well, we work with some of our partners who would rather just lease our network capacity and look at where we're building along the future and do it in that perspective. So it works out on both sides.
Very interesting. There's so many players out there, and there is that great power in harnessing them. But I'm afraid we have to pass on. But thank you very much. It was very informative.
Thank you.
We turn next to southern Brazil, to the city of Curitiba in the state of Parana, a city of 1.9 million people that has been a 6-time Smart21 and 2-time Top 7 intelligent community, most recently last year. And we'll hear next from the technical director for the Curitiba Agency for Development and Innovation, whom I haven't seen since Dublin, Ohio in October. Welcome, Paulo Cesar Krauss.
Good afternoon, Robert. Thank you for the invitation. Jason, Laura, nice to see you. Lou, Zacharila, nice to see you again. Let me share my screen here. Okay, so I believe you all can see the building where I am at right now. It's the headquarters of Curitiba Agency for Development and Innovation. And I hope we will have you all here someday to talk personally. As Robert mentioned, Curitiba is a city of 1.9 million people. It's the capital of the state of Parana. And the great Curitiba has 28 more cities, totaling 3 million people in a great area. Well, Luckily we did have here a state company called Copel Telecom. It's a state, the government of Parana was the main owner of this company, a telecom company. And in 2012, Copel Telecom reached every 399 cities with the optical fiber. So we became the first digital state in Brazil with the optical fiber in every city. So that was a great accomplishment back 11 years ago. Since then, in Curitiba specifically, we have 100% coverage with broadband in the city and 90% adoption by the population. Another huge step towards broadband and 5G, it was taken from City Hall and for us here from the agency, talk with all the operators. They brought to us the need of a new antenna law in the city. So these companies will be able to start investments for 5G, which was going to have an auction in Brazil in 2021. So, but 2 years before that, in 2019, the city approved the new antenna law in favor of 5G. So all these companies could plan their investments for the upcoming 5G. As I mentioned, the federal auction for 5G was done in November 2021. And the 5G authorizations for every city began in 2022. But even before Curitiba had the authorization for 5G, March of 2022, TIM, which is a worldwide company, TIM Brazil and Huawei, they signed a MOU to transform Curitiba in the first 5G city in Brazil. So we can see the release back then, and also the launching of the project here in Curitiba. And then we had the authorization for the 5G last August 16th last year. So then after that, we started some project with 5G as our bus system. Every bus in Curitiba has a camera, but we still don't have online transmission because we don't have the Wi-Fi or the 5G in all of them. So now we're testing that with TIM and Huawei. But besides that, since the broadband actually is provided by private companies in Curitiba, we have around 20 private companies that offer the broadband for the population. Curitiba City Hall also launched a project in 2021, providing free Wi-Fi around the city. We have in 208 places with 274 points for access. The whole project, it's almost complete. We're going to have 310 places with the free Wi-Fi. So this project called Wi-Fi Curitiba, it has 150,000 users a year and 1 million accesses a year. So totally free Wi-Fi. And many common places in Curitiba like parks or squares, bus terminals, schools, in all public equipments of the city, they have that free Wi-Fi for the population. Since the broadband provided by the private companies, it's too expensive in Brazil. The prices is too high for most of the population. So the City Hall has this project to make it accessible for free for a large amount of people. Because technology is one of our pillars here at the city. So we do have our Curitiba app with 700 services. So the population can access every service provided by the city and using the Wi-Fi. Also, one major point that we have improved a lot, even since the pandemic, we enhanced that. And to open a company in Brazil, it was always a lot of bureaucracy. it still is, the average time that you take in Brazil to open a company is 29 hours. And in Curitiba, you can do that in 5 hours. So thanks to the technology and the broadband provided. And with all these actions, we have increased our place in the ranks. There is a ranking in Brazil called Internet Friendly Cities. In 2019, we were ranked 11th on that. And last year, we moved up to 3rd place as a internet friendly city. Also, that all of those actions have helped Curitiba to improve its smart city actions, and also to improve the entrepreneurship in the city. So we do have a national ranking made every year called Ranking Connect Smart Cities. And so we ranked 1st place in Brazil in last October. And one of the categories that is analyzed for that ranking is the entrepreneurship. So entrepreneurship, we ranked 1st. And another category, innovation and technology, we ranked 2nd in Brazil. So that gives you an idea that all the actions that we have been doing to improve the broadband connections, the connectivity has brought some good results for the city. So I guess that's all I have to say for now. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Paulo. That mute button has never been my friend and never will be. Just a couple of follow-up questions for you. I was very intrigued that you sort of halfway through your presentation, you defined what sounds to me like the problem. And that is that broadband is just too darn expensive in Brazil because for a long set of historical reasons for most people. And I don't know if the audience noticed the photograph there of a very happy looking gentleman holding up this 5G contract or agreement that had been signed. That's their mayor, and he is probably the happiest mayor in the world as far as I can tell. Solving that problem is really, really interesting. So it's really unusual for a city to get so far out ahead of the private sector when it comes to, for instance, 5G deployment. And you've done significant investments of time and energy and regulatory discussions and battles probably to accomplish that. Why did the city feel that was so important, so much in its interest to spend that time, a couple of years ahead of any company actually saying, hey, I want to build a 5G network in Curitiba?
Thank you for your question, Robert. Well, I think as I showed my presentation, that luckily we did have a state company called Copel Telecom that made our state the first digital state in Brazil back into 2012. So, and by that time, all the other private operators, they didn't have that. So Copel Telecom was a state company, and used to have the best internet broadband in Brazil by our rankings. So in fact, it became a kind of tradition in Curitiba, looking for the best, looking for the highest capacity of broadband, and due to the accomplished by Copel Telecom. And since then, all the majors, now Copel Telecom actually was sold a couple years ago. It's another name now, but it's still a huge company in the state. And we have 4 more national companies in Brazil, private companies. So there's a huge competition for that. That was provoked by Copel Telecom. So, generally in Curitiba, we are very demanding. People are very demanding about having the best things, the best technology. It's a tradition here. I like to say that I've been seeing innovation happen in Curitiba since I was 5 years old, almost 50 years ago, when we first inaugurate our BRT bus system, the bus rapid transit. And so, I think it's because of people are demanding, and our, the public power has to give answers. And I think also, the work of the agency, the Curitiba Agency for Innovation is doing today, determined by our mayor in 2017, when Mayor Rafael Greca gave to the Curitiba Agency the mission of the innovation. So we've been working with a focal point in innovation and a smart city project. So that's how we, in 2019, we had the innovation committee in Curitiba, and we brought the private sector to discuss the broadband and the future 5G. So they brought us their need. You need to do this for us. So we talked to the mayor, and he said, "Oh, let's do that." And then we made the picture we saw of the mayor raising the antenna law. In that meeting, one of the CEOs, the company CEO, said, with that law, I'm authorizing 100 million reais, $20 million investments in Curitiba for the upcoming 5G.
Right. So that's the power of local government when it chooses to take that. Thank you for that explanation, because I guess I'd sum it up in many ways. In Curitiba, we're broadband equals innovation. Innovation rests on broadband. So and you are an incredibly innovative city. We're going to have to pass on, but hopefully we'll have some time at the end to talk. Finally, we're going to come back to the U.S. and to Central Ohio, where the city of Westerville has twice been a Smart21 and Top 7 community. And this is a small city of some 40,000 people, but it dreams very big when it comes to broadband, as we'll hear from its Assistant City Manager, Jason Bechtold. Jason, welcome. Good to see you.
Thank you, Robert. And appreciate being on the video chat here with Paulo and Laura. Very impressive presentations. Hard act to follow. Let's see here. Share my screen. Okay, can you see it? Are we good? All right. Yeah. Well, I really appreciate the opportunity, Robert. Westerville, Ohio, we've been very active in ICF, and I appreciate the journey that we've been on with ICF, especially Top 7 in 2019 and in 2020. It really is a process for us that we've galvanized our partnerships with our community partners, like our schools, our library, our university that's in our town, Broadband University, and our chamber in the city. Really have gone all in on the triple helix of the ICF. And so excited to be here and talk about our WeConnect, our fiber and data center opportunity or initiative that we have here. And this has been going on for some time. And, part of the exercise that Robert asked me is about the economic and social impact of broadband and what we're doing in Westerville. But right now we're having a moment. The region of Central Ohio and the state of Ohio is having a moment. Let's see here. There we go. We are in Central Ohio, which is Columbus. Westerville is a suburb of Columbus, Ohio, right center in right smack dab center in the state. We are one of the fastest growing regions in the Midwest. With that, we are becoming, as a region and as a state, a tech hub in the Midwest. And we have that Midwest modestness, and we're trying to grow out of that. And we are talking about how we are the Silicon Heartland for the country. And it's an important initiative where we have communities across Central Ohio. You mentioned Dublin, Robert, Hilliard, Westerville, Columbus. The Central Ohio region had taken many steps over a decade ago on how we can become a tech hub with our fiber infrastructure and broadband infrastructure. And we're seeing those results today, where we can say that we are the Silicon Heartland of the country. And we have one of the important entrepreneurs in our community in Central Ohio, Homage Apparel, great t-shirts, they fit very nicely. have embraced the Silicon Heartland, where you can purchase even today online at the Homage website, where the Silicon Heartland, Ohio, which Robert, I'll get you and the team some t-shirts in the mail, but it's proceeds go to funding, direct funding for to the Ohio X, which is fostering that tech ecosystem for schools and nonprofits. Before I go into kind of what we're doing from WeConnect and the data center, I want to show and highlight these assets that we have with this galvanizing the tech community in Central Ohio and the state. It really yielded us the largest economic development project in the region, in the state of Ohio, which is Intel. That is the talk of town right now. Intel is investing $20 billion and 3,000 direct jobs in the Central Ohio region. It is really changing our economy. We're establishing a semiconductor economy in the Midwest, right here in our region. And that is exciting opportunities. $20 billion investment on the first phase. And it's gaining momentum and buzz around a lot of the hard work that we've, as a collective region, have put the infrastructure in. And when we look at Westerville from a proximity, it's only 10 miles away. It's incredible. There's just a little reservoir in between and a lot of land. And so Westerville is well positioned with Intel coming, and the businesses from their suppliers to customers. It's creating a whole ecosystem. And so it's not one of those situations where we just don't arrive and Intel just happens. It's a lot of thoughtful planning, making sure our communities are prepared for these opportunities. And Westerville has been always thoughtful in our infrastructure. And so broadband has been incredibly important for us. And so what we have done over the last decade, or over decade since I think since 2012, have invested an incredible amount in fiber optic network in our community. Westerville has its own electric utility, its own water. We put the sewer, we implement the sewer in partnerships with the sewer, but basically we're a full service community. And so with the fiber connectivity, we needed that hub, which is highlighted here. Let me get my little cursor here, right here, which is a 16,000 square foot data center that is connected to this fiber network. It is really the purpose of WeConnect, is that it's an economic development engine for our community, for our businesses and our residents. And so that our businesses can really compete on a global level and have that infrastructure, but we want them to thrive locally. The purpose initially in 2012 was there was not a lot of fiber. We had engineering firms, architecture firms, and tech companies that were on T1 lines. We had to make the commitment. We had the opportunity because we had the right of way because of the electric utilities that we already provide. We're just adding another line to the buildings. And so that's the commitment. We've committed about $12 to $15 million of broadband. To do this today would be closer to, it would probably double that, probably 30 million. But we're taking advantage of this opportunity. And so this is the 16,000 square foot data center that's connected to our fiber. It's provides 3-tier standards, operating 24/7, 365. We have co-location services, cloud computing, business hosting and managed services, and other products and services that are available. It's really this, I would call the 3-legged stool of technology. You have the fiber, broadband, internet piece, you have the data center piece, and then the services that provide. We have our data center has access with the fiber and broadband connectivity to the cloud of Amazon, Azure, and other data centers that businesses need. Interesting enough, we're seeing a lot of interest from businesses on where their data goes. And so the value proposition for WeConnect is that we can identify what cloud you're on. And that's for critical information is I think very important for businesses to grow in this environment that we're in. So incredibly important that we're looking this fiber data center and services as a utility model. That's what we do as a city very well. And it's a very unique, first of its kind in the country that we're aware of this these three-legged stool model where businesses have an opportunity to provide services to other businesses. They could collaborate with our infrastructure, as well as just do their normal course of business and connect to other data centers to protect their data. The economic impact has been incredibly strong. You could see from a technical debt perspective, we over the last 5 years, 3.5 million, 800 jobs attracted and retained on the average salary of 65,000. This is a utility model, which is you pay to play. So there's no tax dollars being used, but the cities are funded by jobs and income tax from that job and 2%. So if you work out the math equation, those 800 jobs equal $1 million of income taxes annually to the city. So that helps with police, our parks, and other city services that as Paulo mentioned, that we have that our residents have a high quality, expect a high quality level of service. You have to pay for it. But I would also talk about the other piece is the innovation, the faster networks and all that momentum, that buzz. We may not have businesses that participate in this, but it's that notion that it's there. It's like a bike path. Maybe you don't use it, but you want to be close to that bike path because you never know. And I think companies are seeing Westerville, and as well as the region, with having access to this technology infrastructure. They want to be close to it. They want to. They feel that momentum, and so we're very excited about the near future of opportunities. I do want to touch upon the social impact here. During COVID, we worked with one of our healthcare partners, and they needed to stand up a COVID testing location, and we were able to help them secure a building that was vacated, and they needed internet and fiber internet within 48 hours. And for us to be able to deliver that showed that dedication, and they were up and running in those 48 hours to help our residents continue to monitor whether they had COVID or not. In our historic uptown, we've provided Wi-Fi very similar to Paulo, of Wi-Fi and that connectivity, as well as products and services for small businesses in order to attract an Intel or one of our major employers like JP Morgan Chase or DHL. They want to have coffee shops, local coffee shops and local restaurants, and that vibe of that local flair of your own community. And we need to support those and provide that technology infrastructure for them to be successful. One of the most recent projects is this collaboration we have with Hilliard and Westerville. I know Dwayne Powell, the CIO for Hilliard, will be talking later this afternoon. Incredible thought leader in our region from a technology standpoint. He owes me dinner for saying that. But Dwayne and our team collaborated in how we can connect our fiber infrastructures, and that's connected to our WeConnect data center, so that the shared opportunities, so that they can thrive locally, or thrive locally and compete globally as well, because we're lifting each other up. We're not competing, we'll always compete for opportunities, but from a regional perspective, their success is our success. We'll have residents that work in Hilliard, and Hilliard we'll have residents that work in Westerville. That collaboration is definitely a future model that we see that WeConnect can offer, and continue that momentum of growth. And so lastly, the next steps and future opportunities is that continued collaboration with local municipalities. There is an abundance of fiber and broadband being built And we are having great conversations with other jurisdictions on how we can collaborate to help businesses thrive and have our residents have access. And that equity piece is incredibly important, that everybody has an opportunity to be successful. The Intel impact, it's that buzz, that momentum. You know, I can say one of the really quick effects of that Intel, even though it won't be built until 2025, 2026, we just attracted a fintech lab of Western Alliance Bank, who's headquartered in Phoenix, Arizona. It's that buzz, that's momentum. They're going to bring in 150 technology jobs, and their average pay is 6 figures. And they see that buzz, that momentum. They want to be close to that energy of Central Ohio and the Midwest. So we're excited about the future of Intel and that impact, but we also have some incredible planning that we have to do. Fiber expansion possibilities. You know, we talk about fiber to the home. We're finishing up a business plan and legislation so that not just businesses, but a formal program for residents. And we're going to do a pilot program if council authorizes it in May to launch that this year to pilot it and test it. I do think going into the future, though, you know, with our utilities of electric and water, that smart city or smart meters are going to require a fiber connection. And I think that's what the demand for our residents are going to be. They're going to want to have point in time information on their energy costs, how they can manage that, what's their what's their energy footprint. So we're having those conversations as well, and then continuing to work with small businesses and how they continue to thrive in our community, because those are the net job creators. And then continue those conversations and how we work with our partners so that they get access to those large cloud providers. It's a very important piece of, you know, that they can have access to, and we're kind of that we're on the we're an off ramp for a lot of those large cloud providers and building those relationships. You know, I guess I'd conclude with, you know, we were ahead of our time in 2012, and we've been learning every step of the way. And what I enjoy about this and We Connect, what we've done is we've pivoted a lot, but I also think it's expensive and it's hard, but I think the inactivity for communities not to invest in broadband and have a strategy, whatever it might be, that could be 10 times the cost of your community. So I appreciate the time here, Robert, and happy to answer any questions you got.
Yeah, Jason, that's a very, very good point. It's very hard to measure the cost of not doing something, but and the other thing I like that you said was, you know, how you approach this depends entirely on your situation. Maybe you do build a network, maybe you don't need to build a network. Maybe you can come up with ways to reduce the risk for the private sector or entice them to do it in other ways. A lot of imaginative ideas. Just to be clear, the model for We Connect as a network is service to business, right? That's where you started, and that's where you are right now.
That is correct.
Okay. So why in that context was this data center important? And I want to say everybody who's got a network, who builds a network, has something kind of like a data center. You have to run the network. But you built out a relatively big municipally owned data center, which is less usual. And so my question is, why has that been an important part of the mix for you?
No, good point. I think in that era of 2010, 2011, 2012, there was a lot of fiber being built, but then we talked to our economic development partners other communities that have built that, it was never accessible. And so we needed to have that a central hub to make sure the fiber was lit for our businesses, because they have to run their shops. At the same time, we had our community partners, as I mentioned, library or schools, and had these servers in these closets. And so there was this need for a data center space from our own and others. And so this marriage between the two concepts kind of converged to building this 16,000 square foot data center. And so that piece, now from day one, our businesses have access, if it's built in the building, they have access to internet provider. I think right now we're up to 22 internet providers that are housed in our data center. We call it Carrier Row, and that they have choice. And so they have that opportunity to be served from day one. They don't have to figure out the fiber piece, and that was very valuable for us in that time.
Well, thank you. So I'm going to open this up to everybody so everybody can unmute themselves. Just a few final questions, which I've been eager to hear. When cities build out and regions try to build out broadband networks, they very often get mired in debates about technology, which is the best kind of fiber technology or other technology, competition, rights of way, stuff like that. How have you and other people in your communities kept the focus on economic development and social good where it really belongs? And Laura, I mean, that's really your mission, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think that it's really important from my perspective to have that focal point of purpose and mandate. And so we assess different opportunities based on how they fit into the plan relative to the objectives. And so our first objective is, we have over 350 regional municipal operation sites that we need to connect. And that could be a building, it could be a traffic signal, it could be a water tower, it could be anything of those natures. So we have to pool all those. Then we have another, I think it's an addition of 350 sites for our local partners. So, right there you're at 700 sites. And so that means physically building your fiber to get to those locations. And so it takes a lot of planning. You have to map that out. You have to decide what's a priority. And then you have to say over the years, based on models of funding and budget, what can you afford? And I think at the same time, our emphasis was to engage with the private sector and say, this is what we're going to build. This is how we're building it. How would you be interested in participating in that? And that's really led us to a variety of different options. So we can lease fiber, we can, indefeasible right of use on fiber, but now we're also looking at, do we offer indefeasible right of use on interducts? So we always build everything as a 7-way microconduit. And so, there's people who are saying, no, I just want access to the interduct. And we're saying, okay, that's a little different level of complexity, but let's see how we can, offer that in terms of advancing their objectives, which again are about serving businesses, about serving citizens, fiber to the home. We don't have to worry about all the nuances with those if we can just figure out how to help them with the middle mile.
Well, first of all, congratulations on not being afraid of getting mired in those details. That was some pretty good tech talk. But I love the fact what I boiled down what you said to, it's built into your model. Partnership is actually in your model, and therefore you're constantly in the economic development space. So that's really interesting as a dark fiber play. Paulo, how about you? I mean, the question to come back to that is, how do you keep that focus on economic development and social good when you're basically in the network business?
Yes, Robert. Actually, in Brazil, as a city, we kind of we have our hands a little bit tied because telecommunications in Brazil, it's a federal concession. So we don't have much room to manage that. What the city can do is it tries always to work ahead of the time and bring new operators to the city as much as you can and as much as the federal actions allow them. And we have our own projects of every public city of the city. Every public service is offered by our system, by the app, and every citizen can have an access to the Wi-Fi project, or they can go to any public equipment, choose the broadband, while sometimes they cannot afford to have that at home. In fact, I want to share a funny thing. Last Tuesday was a carnival holiday here in Brazil, and I received 3 phone calls from broadband companies offering a broadband to my house, each one with a lower price. So, in fact, it's only the competition that we make the prices go down. And as I say, there's no much that the city can do about it, except from having their own projects to help the entrepreneurship in the city.
Well, okay, so I love it because you just talked about turning a limitation you face into a benefit. economic development is going to be your benefit. So how can we help us all advance faster? That's a really great strategy. Jason, I mean, that same question for you. So how do you avoid, I know you were not the network build person, you were in economic development. So for you, it's natural, but how did the city stay out of that trap of getting all excited about the network and not really thinking about the other things that are more important?
I think Laura's said it best. I mean, it's about flexibility and having that platform. You have that North Star of serving businesses, residents, and helping the community. So I think that is critical because every business is different, from an ISP that could partner with us to someone who would, another company would lease conduit from us, or just a mom and pop business. So having that flexibility, but that platform allows us to be that flexible. I would say too, is you change the conversation. When in the economic development process, what we found was the CIO was never part of the real estate decision. And when you talk to the commercial brokers, they don't know technology. And then they talk to the CFO, which usually houses the CIO. They look at it as, cost. And what we have been changing the conversation and building those relationships with the CIO to give them a voice at the table on their real estate decision, because it is important on where you go from a fiber perspective. And a CFO is, I think the CEO and the CFO, which we always dealt with in the economic development realm, never had I think like 10 years ago, really never thought about, the technology infrastructure is going to be important for my real estate decision because it's going to be a cost savings. So changing the narrative, and right now, I think that has changed, where CEOs and CFOs are relying on CIOs to help with those real estate decisions. That's the narrative that, and anything with broadband, you should tie into the economic development rhythm of your community, because they need to be at the table as well, because it's a huge differentiator for you.
Okay, I hope everyone was writing that down. Important economic development tip. Make sure to get the CIO of your potential relocation or new location prospects into that conversation. We have 3 service models have been presented to you, right? We have a sprawling region that's filling in its gaps, where the private sector is not going to go and invest large sums of money everywhere. So they're finding the places where they can add the value and create that middle mile, which attracts ISPs, attracts investment. We've heard about a large but concentrated city under a single administration doing what it can within the constraints that it faces, and then we've finally a smaller city that really found a way to take its destiny in its hands, build the network, build the data center, and then start turning that into huge economic development value. So, question for all 3 of you: as you listen to each other, what are some of the common themes you heard where one of the other panelists was talking? You said, yeah, we know that problem. And I'm sorry to just throw that at you, but Laura, did you hear anything that you thought was, kind of triggered your own experience in this area, or maybe gave you an idea you hadn't had before?
Definitely. I mean, I think I've spent over 30 years in broadband, and specifically in Canada, looking at rural broadband for the most part. And I think anyone who's spent that long looking at this, Paulo's point about lots of people can't afford it, or hearing, Jason's story about, they couldn't get it, businesses couldn't get access to it, that type of thing. I mean, those are perhaps the most common stories across the world. And so I think what's fascinating is to hear their stories and be able to think back. I'm not sure we're going to go build a data center, because I'm not sure that that's really within the realm of what we politically may want to achieve. But I think that, thinking about those opportunities in terms of what could we do, certainly public Wi-Fi is a question that comes up over and over when I hear Paulo's, story in our realms. Not that we're heading out the door, but it's that question that keeps coming back to: should we be doing it? Should we be doing it? And so I think, having the conversation is always the most important part. That's what I say to people. Right now, there's a directive from certain large cities in Canada to look at low income. So how do we make sure that low income has access to affordable broadband, which I think is similar maybe to Paulo's, story in certain ways. And so one of the things is it's important to have that conversation. We can't just have it quietly off to the side. We need to have it in a very public way. So I think that's the key.
Interesting. Paulo, how about you? What did you hear that struck a chord with you?
Yeah, rather listen to Jason and Laura. So I myself thinking of, Curitiba also innovated 25 years ago when he created his own IT company, back 25 years ago. So now it's a company that provides our IT solutions for the city hall itself. And so maybe it's about time for us to thinking about telecommunications, because it's the future. It is a major key for economic development, and definitely should be a point we should look at closely now, because so we can not be depending forever on a federal concession or in a private large company.
Well, if anybody can pull off that trick, it's going to be your mayor. Anyway, I'm not going to go any further with that because it's too many stories to tell. Jason, how about you? What did you hear from these two, different examples from other countries that kind of struck a chord with you and maybe offered a lesson?
Yeah, I guess the lesson is courage. I like that with Laura and Paulo, they're trying to stay ahead of it. They're trying to move their community forward. It's what I like about ICF is you learn different things, but sometimes you're doing a lot of similar. You're thinking through things in a similar mindset, that we're in the same universe, going through the same issues, whether it's Wi-Fi or connectivity or the equity piece and the connectivity of the different sensors. I think it's courage that these conversations help me and help our team to validate we're not too out there, and that have people out there thinking about and crazy enough that the impacts that each of their communities are doing is going to be impacting 5 years from now. And I think having that courage that other people are out there thinking like we are keeps us grounded and keeps us going when you get those hits, because change requires conflict. And I think these are change agents that I'm looking at. And I think that's pretty special, and having that courage to keep going.
I like that. Yes, thank you very much. Just a final quick question. We just got a couple of minutes left. And this is I jotted this down while you were speaking, Laura. You used the phrase critical infrastructure. That's the business that, York region is in the business of building critical infrastructure. Have we finally gotten to the point where local, regional, provincial or state and national government actually really do think that broadband for pretty much everybody is critical infrastructure, or do we still have a way to travel on that road?
Well, that's a great question. So, I mean, in Canada, I think we're still struggling. I think that politically, the answer is yes. Yes, the pandemic really, for us, for those of you that don't know Canada, it's a lot of concentrated areas that do okay, and then a vast, eternal, rural and very remote areas that are very, not well served by any technology. And I think that, I've been in all. I've done satellite, I've done wireless. So I mean, we could have those long debates, but the answer at the end of the day is that those really do come about as a second-class citizen. And so fiber really is the only long answer that's got a good return on investment, 50 to 100 years, that you can grow and develop and feed off of. And I think that the problem isn't political will. The problem is, how do we change regulation? The problem is, how do we work with the larger companies who have so much at risk but can't move fast enough? And those are really the struggles that I think we all have, and regardless of our country, is that we have these regulatory structures that aren't moving the way we need them to, that tend to make efforts, but they're not, to Jason's point, I don't know that they're courageous enough, that they just don't take the big jump, the big leap, and put us into that whole new scenario that could help us propel it a lot faster.
Paulo, what's your view on that? Is in Brazil, is broadband critical infrastructure yet?
Yeah, definitely, Robert. As Laura mentioned, the political will sometimes is not enough. No, courage is not enough, because you do depend on regulation. You do depend and with the large companies that operate in Brazil, and most of them, we have like 5 or 6 multinationals that operate the broadband in Brazil. So, you know, as I said, last year, March, Team Brazil and Huawei announced that Curitiba will be first 5G city. And, you know, we're very glad about that, but we're not naive. We know that we're a good market for them, you know, and, you know, so, you know, the image of the city also helps them. But, you know, it's a long process. You know, we're close to them, you know, since then we have done 3 major events with Team Howard in Curitiba. So, and we try our best to convince them, you know, that, you know, we are a good market for them, but they have to be a ESG company also for Curitiba.
Right. So critical, yeah, but somebody else still owns it. Jason, last word to you. If you can keep it kind of short, I'd appreciate it.
Sure. I would say it's kind of ongoing, and it's a show me world. And I think at the local level, we have to show the state and the country how to collaborate, because we are nimble, and they and the state and the federal government have to be in my perspective, have to be the last stand to fully understand. And we are the data points for the continued success, and that collaboration with Hilliard, Dwayne, as well as their economic development director, Dave Meadows. Those collaborations had to continue, and we have to show those examples of success. And those are just data points that so that the state and the federal level get that buy-in. So it's an ongoing process, as Paulo stated.
Well, yeah, as a guy in the telecommunications business told me years and years and years ago, the business model is very simple. You bury a wire in the ground, and 50 years later, you're still charging for it. That's the problem. We have to end here. I want to thank very, very much for their insights, their time, and their talents. Paulo Cesar Krauss, who from the city of Curitiba in Brazil, Laura Bradley from the Municipality of York in Ontario, Canada, and Jason Bechtold from Westerville, Ohio, here in the United States.